When my daughter shouted, "You will either serve my husband or get out of my house," I did not respond in anger. Instead, I smiled, took my suitcase and left, leaving behind the house I, Evelyn Hartman, had paid for with my life. She was waiting for me to break down as usual. But this time, everything was different. A week later, I had 22 missed calls, and that was far from the end of my plan. They will regret their words and their actions. My keys were still warm in my palm when I pushed through the front door, grocery bags cutting into my wrists. The Saturday afternoon light filtered through the living room curtains, casting everything in that soft spring glow that usually made me smile. Not today. Harry was sprawled in Evelyn Hartman's leather recliner, Martha's last gift to her before the cancer took her. His stocking feet were propped up, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his fingers. The remote control rested on his belly like he owned the place, which I suppose he thought he did, old man. He didn't even look up from the basketball game. "Grab me another beer from the fridge while you're up." Evelyn Hartman set the grocery bags down slowly, feeling the weight of the milk cartons and bread loaves. The plastic handles had left red marks across me palms. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Harry's eyes stayed fixed on the television screen. "Corona? Not that cheap stuff you drink?" Something cold settled in me chest. I bought those Coronas for him. I'd spent my Social Security check on beer I would never drink. "Harry," I said, my voice tight, "I just walked in. I need to put these groceries away." Finally, he looked at me. That same expression I'd seen too many times, the one that told me I was being unreasonable, I was being difficult. "What's the big deal? You're already standing. I'm comfortable." "The big deal," I said evenly, "is that this is my house." Harry's feet hit the floor with a thud. He rose slowly, stretching his height like a weapon. At 30, he was bigger than me, broader, but I'd been dealing with difficult men long before he was even born. "Your house?" "Funny," he sneered. "Because your daughter and I live here. We pay the bills with my money." "Details?" I asked, my voice steady. He stepped closer, beer still in hand, the sour smell of it drifting between us. "Look, Clark," I said, my voice low but firm. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. You want to keep living here peacefully? Then you play ball. Simple as that." The kitchen door swung open. Tiffany appeared, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a dish towel clutched in her hands. She took in the scene, Harry towering over me, the tension in the room so thick it could choke you. "What's going on?" Her voice carried that warning tone I remembered from her teenage years. "Your mother's being difficult," Harry said without taking his eyes off me. "I asked her to get me a beer and she's making it into some kind of federal case." Tiffany looked at me with disappointment, like I was a child acting out. "Mom, just get him the beer. It's not worth fighting over." But Harry wasn't done. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "See, Evelyn, here's how it's going to work. You live in our house. You contribute. That means when I ask you to do something, you do it. No questions, no attitude. Our house." I kept my voice level even though my heart was hammering. "That's right." Tiffany stepped beside her husband, presenting a united front. "Mom, you need to decide right now. Either you help Harry and do what he asks, or you can pack your things and leave." The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my daughter, searching for any hint of the little girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. She stared back at me with Harry's same entitled expression. "All right," I said quietly. Harry smirked, thinking he'd won. "Good. Now, about that beer." "I'll pack." The smirk died on his face. Tiffany's mouth fell open slightly as if she'd expected me to crumble, to apologize, to shuffle into the kitchen like a beaten dog. I turned toward the hallway, leaving the grocery bags where they sat. Behind me, I heard Harry's sharp intake of breath. Tiffany whispered, "Mom, wait." But I was already walking toward my bedroom, my footsteps steady on the hardwood floor Martha and I had refinished together 20 years ago. The suitcase came down from the closet shelf with a soft thump. I'd bought it for our honeymoon to Yellowstone, back when Martha was still alive and the future stretched ahead like an open road. Now it gaped empty on the bed, waiting to swallow what remained of my life in this house. I packed methodically. Underwear, socks, 3 changes of clothes. Not everything, just enough. From the living room came the low murmur of urgent whispers, Harry's voice rising now and then above Tiffany's softer tones. They were figuring out what to do, how to handle the old woman's unexpected rebellion. My hands moved without conscious thought, folding shirts, rolling ties. The photo of Martha went into the side pocket, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. My medications, reading glasses, the small leather journal where I tracked expenses. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway, they stopped talking. Harry had returned to his chair, but his posture was different now, alert, watchful. Tiffany stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, trying to look stern but failing to hide her uncertainty. Neither of them said goodbye. The car started on the first try, my old Buick, reliable as always. I backed out of the driveway without looking at the house, without checking if they were watching from the window. The 30-minute drive to Pine Lodge gave me time to think. Memories came in waves as I passed through downtown Kalispell, Tiffany's college tuition, $40,000 a year for that fancy private school she had insisted on. I'd worked overtime at the bank for 4 straight years, taking on extra clients, staying late to review loan applications. My hands cramped just remembering all those forms. Her wedding had cost $25,000. Harry's family couldn't afford their half, so I'd covered it quietly, not wanting to embarrass anyone. The reception hall, the flowers, her dress, everything had to be perfect for my little girl's special day. Then came the house, $80,000 from my retirement savings for their down payment, because young couples needed help getting started. That's what mothers did, I told myself. That's what Martha would have wanted. The monthly payments followed like clockwork. $1,200 for their mortgage, $300 for utilities, $500 for groceries when money got tight. My Social Security check disappeared into their lives piece by piece, and I'd convinced myself it was love. Pine Lodge Motel sat on the outskirts of town, a low building with faded paint and a neon sign that flickered intermittently. The room was small but clean, a bed, a chair, a tiny table by the window. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat heavily on the edge of the mattress. The silence was different here, not the comfortable quiet of my own home, but the hollow emptiness of a temporary space. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts. Bank numbers, insurance companies, credit card services, numbers I knew by heart from 30 years in finance. Tomorrow was Sunday, but some things could still be done. Some calls could still be made. I opened my laptop on the small table and logged into my online banking. Account balances glowed on the screen, checking, savings, retirement accounts. Numbers that represented a lifetime of careful planning, of denying myself small luxuries so I could take care of my family. The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting for me to decide what came next. Sunday morning arrived gray and overcast, fitting my mood perfectly. I spread my paperwork across the motel table like a general planning a campaign. Bank statements, insurance policies, legal documents, everything organized, everything within reach. The first call went to First National Bank. Sunday banking was limited, but automated systems never slept. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartman," the representative said after I navigated through the phone tree. "How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Pine Street, the account ending in 4729. A pause, the sound of computer keys clicking. "Ma'am, I show that payment has been active for 5 years. Are you sure you want to discontinue it?" "Completely sure. May I ask the reason for the change?" "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial assistance." More clicking. "Very well, Mrs. Hartman. The automatic payment will be canceled effective immediately. You should receive written confirmation within 3 business days." The second call was easier. Geico had been insuring both their cars on my policy for 3 years. Harry's Silverado, Tiffany's Honda, $280 every month for vehicles I never drove, coverage for accidents I'd never cause. I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy, I told the agent. My daughter and son-in-law will need to establish their own coverage. When would you like this change to take effect? Today. The credit cards took longer. Tiffany was an authorized user on 3 of my accounts: Visa, MasterCard, and the store card from Costco. $500 monthly I'd been paying on balances I'd never created, purchases I'd never made. Mrs. Hartman, removing authorized users will require them to apply for their own credit, the Visa representative explained. Any outstanding balances will remain your responsibility, but they won't be able to make new charges. I understand. Remove them immediately. Each call felt like lifting a weight from my shoulders. 30 years of banking experience had taught me the system's ins and outs, the legal language, the proper procedures. Everything I was doing was completely within my rights. The life insurance change required written documentation, but I started the process. $100,000 that was supposed to go to Tiffany, money I'd earned to protect my family's future. But family meant something different now. By noon, I'd made 8 calls. Mortgage payments stopped, insurance canceled, credit cards blocked, the automatic transfers that had been bleeding my accounts dry for years. All of it ended with polite conversations and confirmation numbers. I sat back in the cheap motel chair and looked at my notes. Confirmation numbers, reference codes, effective dates, the paper trail of financial independence. My phone sat silent on the table. No missed calls, no urgent messages. They didn't know yet. Probably wouldn't know until the first payment bounced. The first bill arrived with their names on it instead of mine. But they would know soon enough. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly man was loading suitcases into a pickup truck, his wife directing the operation with gentle efficiency, probably heading home from visiting grandchildren or maybe starting a long postponed vacation. I envied their easy partnership, the way they moved around each other with practiced familiarity. Martha and I had been like that once. My phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. I let it ring. The week passed quietly for me, but apparently not for them. I'd settled into a routine at Pine Lodge. Coffee from the lobby, breakfast at the diner down the street, long walks around Kalispell's quiet neighborhoods. My phone accumulated missed calls like a collection I had no interest in starting. By Wednesday, there were 12 messages. By Friday, 22. I listened to them in chronological order, watching the progression from confusion to anger to desperation. The first few were almost casual. Tiffany asking if there was some kind of banking error with the mortgage payment. Harry left brief, annoyed messages about the car insurance lapsing. But by the middle of the week, panic had crept in. Mom, what the hell is going on? Tiffany's voice cracked with frustration. The bank says you stopped the automatic payment. They want the full amount by Friday, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. Harry's messages grew increasingly aggressive. Mom, you need to fix this right now. I've got people asking questions about my insurance. You're making us look like deadbeats. The later calls bordered on begging, Tiffany crying, promising they'd work something out if I just called them back. Harry tried a different approach, claiming he'd been too harsh and wanted to make things right. I deleted each message after listening, feeling nothing but mild curiosity at their growing desperation. Thursday morning brought a knock at my motel room door. Through the peephole, I saw them both. Tiffany stood there in a wrinkled sweater, Harry in his work clothes, both looking like they'd slept badly. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mom. Tiffany's eyes were red-rimmed, her usual composure cracked. We need to talk. About what? Harry pushed forward, his face flushed with anger. About the fact that you're trying to ruin our lives over some stupid argument about beer. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said calmly. I'm simply no longer paying for your lives. The mortgage, Mom. Harry's voice rose. You can't just stop paying the mortgage. That's our house. Actually, it's my house. My name on the deed. My signature on the loan. You two were just guests. Tiffany grabbed Harry's arm as he stepped closer to the door. Mom, please, we can work this out. Harry was wrong to talk to you that way. We both were, but you can't just leave us with no warning, no discussion. You gave me an ultimatum, I reminded her. Do what Harry says or get out. Those were your exact words. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. I looked at my daughter, seeing a stranger wearing her face. You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to choose option 2. Harry tried a different approach, his voice artificially calm. Look, we all said things we didn't mean. But you're talking about our home, our credit, our whole lives. You can't just pull the rug out like this. I can, and I did. I started to close the door. You wanted me to leave. I left. You wanted to handle your own lives. Now you can. Mom, wait. Tiffany's voice broke. What about family? What about everything we've been through together? I paused, looking at her desperate face. For a moment, I remembered the little girl who used to help me rake leaves in the fall, who brought me dandelions she'd picked from the yard. But that little girl had grown into someone who could stand by while her husband humiliated her mother in her own living room. Family works both ways, sweetheart, I said quietly. I spent 5 years taking care of you both. When it was time for you to take care of me, you chose him instead. Harry's fake composure cracked. You crazy old witch, you can't just— I can call the police if you keep raising your voice, I interrupted. This is private property, and you're disturbing the peace. They stared at me, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the soft-hearted mother and grandmother-to-be, not the convenient bank account with legs, just a woman who'd finally learned to say no. Harry grabbed Tiffany's elbow. Come on, we'll figure this out ourselves. They walked back to their car, Harry's swagger replaced by a worried hunch, Tiffany looking back over her shoulder like she was seeing a stranger. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and returned to my laptop. There were still calls to make, still accounts to close. The work of dismantling a relationship was far from finished. I needed coffee and a chance to think clearly. The diner on Main Street had always been my refuge when Martha was alive. She'd meet me there after her doctor appointments, and we'd split a piece of apple pie while discussing nothing important. Tuesday morning found me walking the familiar 3 blocks, my breath visible in the crisp mountain air. The routine felt grounding after yesterday's confrontation. That morning, I reorganized my paperwork, bank statements, confirmation slips, spread across the motel desk like a commander reviewing strategy before battle. When the diner's bell chimed above me, the scent of coffee and bacon grease wrapped around me like a comfort I hadn't realized I missed. I had barely settled into my usual corner booth when a familiar voice called out, Evelyn Hartman? Well, I'll be damned. Bob Harrison rose from a window table, newspaper tucked beneath his arm. We had worked side by side at First National for 15 years before his transfer downtown. He'd handled the commercial loans while I specialized in personal accounts, enough coffee breaks shared to consider him more than just a colleague. Bob, I stood to shake his hand. Good to see you. Mind if I join you? It's been ages, since Martha's memorial, I think. He slid into the seat opposite before I finished the thought. Heard you're staying at Pine Lodge. Everything all right? The waitress brought coffee before I could answer. I let the interruption buy me time, deciding how much of the truth to share. Bob was someone I trusted, but he was still a banker, bound by certain obligations. After a pause, I said carefully, family issues. I just needed space to think. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That son-in-law of yours, he tried to pull a fast one a few months ago. My cup froze halfway to my lips. What kind of trick? I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. He wanted a home equity loan, $50,000, claimed your house was his. Bob's brow darkened. He even brought documents. The noise of the diner seemed to fade away. My house. He tried to steal my house. Of course, when we ran the title search, everything came back to you, Bob added quickly. Clean deed, no cosigners, nothing that gave him the right. I set the cup down with deliberate care. When was this? December, maybe January. I handled the file myself. It was a large amount. Bob leaned closer, his voice dropping. Evelyn, those papers weren't a mistake. They were forged. Fraud, plain and simple. The words hit me like a bucket of cold water. Months ago, Harry had already been scheming. This wasn't desperation born yesterday. This was calculation. You didn't report him? I asked. We denied the loan and flagged his information. Technically, no money moved, so it's a gray zone legally, but I kept everything on file. Bob's eyes searched mine. You really had no idea? I shook my head, remembering every dinner where he complained about money while secretly plotting to rob me blind. What would he even use the money for? Bob glanced around, lowering his voice further. Application said home improvements, but word is gambling debts, big ones. How big? I asked. Jim Morrison might know. You remember him? Detective? He told me Harry's a regular at Glacier Peaks Casino. Yes, I remembered Jim. His daughter graduated with Tiffany. If Jim said it, it was true. Jim Morrison. Yes, I remembered him well. We'd once worked together on the church building committee, and his daughter had been in Tiffany's class. If Jim said Harry gambled, I could take it as fact. Bob, thank you, I said, sliding my untouched coffee aside. You've told me more than you know. He nodded gravely. Be careful, Evelyn. A man who forges papers to cheat his own family. He's capable of worse. I left the diner with my mind racing. Suddenly, Harry's temper, his smug demands, his contempt, it all made sense. I hadn't been a mother-in-law to him. I had been a target, a source of cash to feed his habit. His ultimatum at the house wasn't about respect, it was about keeping the money flowing. Back at Pine Lodge, I opened my laptop and began a file. Harry Thompson. Evidence. If one lie had unraveled, how many others were still hidden? Time was running short. The courthouse closed at 5. I had barely an hour to act. By the time I reached the Flathead County Courthouse, its brick walls no longer intimidated me the way they had in my 20s. Now, it felt like an ally. On the second floor, the clerk processed my eviction filing with brisk efficiency. Mrs. Hartman, you understand this is your daughter's residence? She asked, glancing between the deed and the papers. It's my property, I replied firmly, and they violated the conditions of staying there. Her pen paused. Which conditions? I had anticipated this. Mutual respect and contribution to expenses, both broken, both undeniable. The clerk stamped the papers with authority. 30-day notice begins today. If they contest, a hearing will be scheduled. If not, the sheriff will serve final papers. How long before they receive this? I asked. Usually within 48 hours. I gathered the documents, the weight of law in my hands. No more manipulation, no more guilt-tripping. From here on, everything would move through proper channels. The clerk explained the sheriff's office would handle delivery, usually within 2 days. I thanked her, clutching the stamped papers like a shield. For the first time in years, I felt the law standing beside me. No more pleading or bargaining. This time the rules were on my side. My next stop was the police station. Detective Jim Morrison's office was small, cluttered with files and coffee stains. He looked older than I remembered, more gray, deeper lines, but his handshake was still strong. Evelyn, he said, what brings you here? Information, I told him. Bob Harrison said you might know about Harry Thompson's gambling. Jim's face shifted, professional interest settling in. Your son-in-law? Give me some context. So I told him. The ultimatum, my departure, Bob's story of forged documents. Jim listened carefully, jotting notes. When I finished, he nodded. Harry's a familiar face at Glacier Peaks, mostly poker, higher stakes recently, more frequent visits. I asked, any idea how much he owes? Jim's voice was steady. hard to pin down exactly. Different creditors, different amounts, but based on what we've heard, 18, maybe 20,000. The number staggered me. Harry, living under my roof, eating my food, demanding my obedience, while burning through enough cash to buy a car. Who does he owe? I asked quietly. A mix, Jim said. Some legitimate lenders, others less official, the kind who don't bother with court papers. I left the station shaken but clearer than ever. I wasn't just a bank to him, I was his last desperate lifeline. Jim explained further, his tone grave. The legitimate creditors are impatient. The others, the ones outside the law, they won't send reminders. They'll send warnings. How much time does he have? I asked. He's been stalling for 6 weeks, maybe 3 months before things escalate. I left the station with a new picture of Harry. Not just arrogant, but cornered, dangerous. The gambling debts explained everything. His attempt to mortgage my house, the temper, the constant demands. He hadn't seen me as family. He'd seen me as cover, as his only escape. That night, I sat in my motel room reviewing the day's progress. Eviction notice filed, proof of fraud collected, a police detective aware of his debts. I updated my Harry Thompson evidence file, adding Morrison's notes to Bob's revelations. Years in banking had trained me to recognize patterns, and the pattern here was unmistakable. Harry was dishonest, desperate, and growing more reckless with each day. I had to prepare for whatever he might try next. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start making calls, not to pay his debts, but to ensure creditors knew he had no claim on me or my property. The truth could protect me. In small towns like Kalispell, word traveled quickly. By Friday, I realized I couldn't just defend myself. I needed to control the story. The first encounter came at the post office. Mrs. Henderson from church cornered me by the stamp machine, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Evelyn, dear, I've been hearing troubling things. Is everything all right at home?" I chose my words carefully, knowing she would repeat them to half the congregation before Sunday. Tiffany and Harry asked me to move out, so I did. Adult children sometimes need to face their own responsibilities. Her eyebrows rose sharply. "They asked you to leave your own home?" I simply nodded. The truth would spread on its own. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I always wondered how they managed that house on Harry's salary. And you paid for their wedding too, didn't you?" I just nodded. No need to add fuel. Facts would be enough. My next stop was Miller's Hardware, where I'd picked up part-time work after retiring from the bank. Tom Kowalski, the owner, looked up from his inventory sheets with genuine concern. "Evelyn, heard you've been staying out at Pine Lodge. What's going on?" 3 employees gathered around as I told the story. Their shock was immediate. "You paid their tuition?" Dave, the assistant manager, shook his head. "Harry told everyone his family had money, said they were helping you with the mortgage." "Harry said many things that weren't true," I replied evenly. Tom's expression darkened. "That explains why he never took extra shifts, always claimed he had other commitments." "Commitments at the casino," Sarah from the paint counter muttered. By the time I left the hardware store, I knew the truth would spread faster than any rumor Harry could invent. My third stop was St. Mark's Lutheran Church. Pastor Williams was preparing for Sunday service when he welcomed me into his office. He offered me a seat and a cup of coffee, his manner direct. "Evelyn, several folks are worried about you. Can you tell me what's happening?" I appreciated his honesty. He wasn't seeking gossip. He wanted to help. "Pastor, I've been supporting my daughter and son-in-law for 5 years. Last week they told me I could stay only if I followed Harry's orders. I chose to leave instead." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes love means letting people face their own consequences, and it sounds like you've shielded them from that for far too long." "Too long," I admitted. On my walk back to the motel, I stopped at Annie's coffee shop for an afternoon cup. The place buzzed with its usual Friday crowd, retirees, off-duty workers, mothers with strollers. I sat in the corner, listening. Heard Harry owes money all over town. Evelyn's been paying their bills for years. Always seemed odd they lived so well on his paycheck. The town's rumor mill was working exactly as I'd expected, truth spreading like wildfire. When I stepped outside, my phone rang. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor of 20 years, sounded worried. "Evelyn, I hope you don't mind me calling. There's been a lot of shouting at the house, mostly Harry, but Tiffany too. Yesterday the police drove by twice." "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. "I appreciate you keeping an eye out." Her voice carried real concern. "Are you safe? Do you need anything?" "I'm fine," I assured her, taking it one day at a time. That evening, I sat in my motel room replaying the day's conversations. Social pressure was mounting, but I hadn't lifted a finger to smear them. Truth alone was enough. People saw injustice clearly when it was laid bare. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, familiar area code. I let it go to voicemail. "This is Marcus Webb from Frontier Financial Services. We're looking for Harry Thompson about a delinquent account. Please call us back." Harry had probably used my address for his loans. More evidence, more lies. Another note for my growing file. I should have expected retaliation. Harry never did know how to lose quietly. Saturday morning began peacefully enough. I was sipping coffee, reviewing bank statements, when the phone started buzzing. First Tom from the hardware store, then Mrs. Henderson, then Pastor Williams. Each call carried the same troubling update. Harry was making his rounds in town, spinning his own story. "Evelyn, you need to hear this," Tom said, his voice tight with anger. "Harry came in loud, telling everyone you'd abandoned them, claims you promised to support them forever, then cut them off out of spite." "What else did he say?" I asked. "That you're having some kind of breakdown, that you threw them out because Tiffany wouldn't let you control their lives. He even told people there's a medical emergency in the family and you refuse to help." I thanked Tom and hung up, my mind already connecting the dots. Harry's creditors must have been circling tighter if he was desperate enough to launch a smear campaign. The angrier the calls, the closer he was to losing control. The next call confirmed what I suspected. "Mrs. Hartman, this is Detective Morrison. Just a heads up. Harry came in this morning to file a complaint. Claimed you were being manipulated, said it was elder abuse, that you're making bad financial decisions." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Elder abuse, his attempt to twist the narrative into an official record. "I told him we'd need medical proof and witness statements," Morrison added, which, of course, he doesn't have. 20 minutes later, Tiffany's number lit up my phone. "Mom, please pick up. I know you're angry, but you don't understand everything." Her voice wavered with tears, then the blow. "I'm pregnant, Mom. The stress is making me sick. The doctor says I could lose the baby." The familiar ache twisted in my chest, protectiveness, the same weakness they'd exploited for years. But something in her tone rang false, too rehearsed, too perfectly timed. "Congratulations, sweetheart. When did you find out?" "Last week, right before all this happened." Her sob cracked convincingly. "Mom, please. I can't lose this baby because of money. You always said family comes first." "Family does come first," I replied evenly. "That's why I spent $60,000 on your education and $25,000 on your wedding." Her silence spoke louder than words. Then, "But what about now? What about your grandchild?" The timing felt staged, the emotion manufactured. I pressed further. "Tiffany, have you seen a doctor about these complications?" A pause. I have an appointment next week. Dr. Richards at the women's clinic." I knew Dr. Richards. Martha had trusted her for years. "I'll call her office about handling expenses," I said firmly. "Mom, no, you can't just call my doctor. That's private." "You're right," I replied. "Then have her call me directly to discuss payment options." The line went dead. An hour later, while walking downtown, I spotted Harry outside First National Bank. His voice was loud, theatrical, aimed at anyone who would listen. "She's lost it," he barked. Senile old woman thinks everyone's out to rob her. Kicked her pregnant daughter onto the street over nothing. I approached quietly. The crowd saw me first, their expressions shifting as they connected his words to my presence. Harry spun around, his face flushing. There she is, the woman who abandoned her own family. Hello, Harry, I said evenly. How's that gambling debt working out? The words landed like a punch. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You're crazy, he sputtered. I don't know what you're talking about. 18,000, I said, my voice calm but firm. Glacier Peaks Casino, poker tables mostly. Funny how much money someone can lose when they're not paying their own living expenses. Harry's face went from red to purple. He stepped closer, trying to use his size like a weapon. You senile old witch, you can't just… I can document every dollar I've spent on you for 5 years, I cut in. Can you prove where your paycheck went? The crowd hushed, every ear turned toward us. Harry faltered, realizing the story was slipping from his control. Come on, he muttered, shoving past the people. This isn't over, Evelyn. I stood watching as he stormed off, noting how several bystanders raised their phones, already typing. In a town like ours, it would be all over social media within the hour. Back at Pine Lodge, I opened my laptop and began typing up the day's events. Harry's lies couldn't stand against the truth. Too many people knew my character. Yet Tiffany's pregnancy claim lingered in my thoughts. If true, it complicated everything. I needed clarity before deciding my next step. I picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Richards's office. If there was a real emergency, I would help, but I refused to be manipulated by another staged crisis. Harry's threats had crossed a line. I called Detective Morrison. Jim, we need to talk. His behavior today shows a pattern I can't ignore. How so? He confronted me in public, made threatening gestures, and looked unhinged. Through the motel window, I could see downtown Kalispell glowing under streetlights. I'd like to file a formal complaint, maybe even protection options. Come in tomorrow with your notes, he said. Bring whatever you've got. But I didn't have to wait until morning. An hour later, Steve Brennan, the Pine Lodge night manager, knocked on my door. Mrs. Hartman, that man who was yelling in the lot earlier, he came back, stood outside your door for 5 minutes, then left. Guests were nervous. Steve, a retired Army sergeant, had seen enough men unravel to recognize the signs. Did he say anything? I asked. Muttered about teaching old fools lessons. It's on the security cameras if you want it. Real evidence, video, proof. Steve, would you give that footage to the police? Of course, he said firmly. Men like that shouldn't be harassing residents. The next morning, I carried the USB stick and my timeline of incidents into Morrison's office. He reviewed it all carefully, flipping pages, replaying clips. Evelyn, he said finally, this shows a clear pattern of intimidation. Combined with what I saw at the bank, we can move forward with a restraining order. What does that mean exactly? Harry would be legally barred from coming within 500 feet of you or your property, violated, and he goes straight to jail. Jim leaned back, frowning. There's something else you need to know. Harry spoke to a lawyer on Friday, he continued, asked about adverse possession laws. The words chilled me. Squatters' rights? Exactly. He was researching whether he could claim your house after 5 years. They've been there 3. He was planning to wait 2 more, then file. The realization staggered me. He hadn't just freeloaded. He'd mapped out a long con to steal my home through legal loopholes. Does he have a case? I asked. Not at all, Jim assured me. He had permission to stay, never paid taxes or rent. No claim, but it shows intent. He's been planning this for years. I sat frozen, the truth finally undeniable. The beer demand, the arrogance, the threats, none of it was about family. It was about control, about theft. The realization staggered me. He hadn't just freeloaded. He'd mapped out a long con to steal my home through legal loopholes. Does he have a case? I asked. Not at all, Jim assured me. He had permission to stay, never paid taxes or rent, no claim, but it shows intent. He's been planning this for years. I sat frozen, the truth finally undeniable. The beer demand, the arrogance, the threats, none of it was about family. It was about control, about theft. What about the restraining order? I asked. With what you've provided, I can push it through today. You'll have it this afternoon. I walked out of the police station with a different understanding of Harry. His tantrums weren't about dominance. They were desperate attempts to protect a scheme years in the making. He hadn't just wanted access to my money. He wanted the house itself. Out on the sidewalk, I scrolled through my contacts. Time to start making calls. First was Marcus Webb at Frontier Financial Services, the creditor who had left a message. Mr. Webb, I'm returning your call about Harry Thompson. Just so you know, he no longer lives at my address, and he has no legal claim to my property. He listed it fraudulently. I gave them his workplace, Mountain View Auto Dealership on Highway 93. By noon, I had spoken with 6 different agencies. One by one, I cut the false ties he'd tried to wrap around me. Harry's carefully stacked house of cards was about to collapse. That afternoon, Judge Morrison signed the restraining order. Harry Thompson was now legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. Any violation meant immediate arrest. I drove back to Pine Lodge with the first real taste of justice. For 3 years, he had plotted to steal my home. Now he couldn't even walk near it. As I parked back at Pine Lodge, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. "This isn't over, old woman." I forwarded it to Detective Morrison, then blocked the sender. Evidence collection had become second nature now. Monday morning, I filed the restraining order at the courthouse. By noon, the clerk stamped it with efficient precision. "Mrs. Hartman, this is effective immediately. Any contact within 500 feet is a violation." I thanked her and stepped outside, knowing the sheriff's deputy would serve Harry within hours. My phone rang again before I reached the car. "Evelyn, this is Mike Brennan from Mountain View Auto." Harry's boss. A man I'd always respected. "I need to ask you something directly. Are the things Harry's been saying true?" "What's he been telling you?" I asked. "That you've had some kind of breakdown, that you kicked him out because of dementia, and that there's a family medical emergency you're refusing to help with." Mike's voice was skeptical. "Thing is, Evelyn, I've known you for 20 years. That doesn't sound like you." "Harry gave me an ultimatum," I said simply. "Obey him or leave my own home. I chose to leave. There's no medical emergency, and my mind is sound. My banker, lawyer, and detective will all confirm that." There was a pause on the line. Then Mike sighed. "I was afraid of that. 3 customers mentioned today that Harry owes them money. One recognized him from the casino. It's starting to hurt my business." "I understand," I said quietly. "I'm going to have to let him go. I can't keep someone like that around my clients." Not 20 minutes later, I was sipping coffee at Annie's when I saw the first debt collector's car pull up in front of my old house. Continental Credit Recovery, their logo painted on the door. Harry's lies were catching up faster than even I had expected. Not long after, my phone rang again. Tiffany's number. "Mom, there are men at the house asking about Harry's debts," she said, her voice shaking. "They want to know our assets, our income, everything." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I said the truth, that Harry doesn't own the house, that he doesn't live here anymore. But they're talking about garnishing wages, seizing property. Mom, I don't understand." "That's what happens when someone borrows money they can't repay," I said steadily. "These are Harry's consequences, not mine." Her voice dropped to a whisper. $18,000? How is that even possible? She truly hadn't known. "Gambling," I answered. "Poker tables at Glacier Peaks, according to Detective Morrison." Silence followed. Then, softly, "He told me he was working overtime." "I'm sorry you had to learn this way," I told her. She exhaled shakily. "The sheriff was here too. Served Harry with some kind of papers. He's been raging ever since, throwing things. The restraining order, I explained. He's probably realizing his options are gone. Her voice cracked. He's talking about leaving town. Says there's nothing left here for him. What am I supposed to do? Make your decisions based on the man Harry really is, not the man you hoped he was. That evening, I parked across from the house. Through the window, I saw them arguing, Harry's arms flailing, Tiffany shrinking back. The fairy tale had rotted. Reality was settling in. Mrs. Patterson waved sadly from her porch. She'd watched all of this unfold, the way only a longtime neighbor could. My phone buzzed. A text from Steve at Pine Lodge. That guy tried to get in again. I reminded him about the restraining order. He left angry. I forwarded it to Detective Morrison immediately. Harry was unraveling, violating court orders within hours of being served. Reckless, dangerous, predictable. And in his desperation, I knew he had only two choices: face his debts like an adult, or run. A man drowning in gambling debts, jobless with the law closing in, Harry's options were shrinking. He could face responsibility, or he could run. And knowing him, flight was far more likely. But what about Tiffany? Would she follow him into the abyss, clinging to loyalty? Or would she finally see him for who he was? Either way, I was finished shielding them. The day they forced me to choose between my dignity and their demands, I chose dignity. 2 more days of watching their spiral was enough. On Wednesday morning, I called Tiffany. Meet me at the diner, just you. I can't leave Harry alone right now, Mom. He's struggling. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order forbids me from being near him. There was a pause, then softly, Where? Main Street Diner. 2 o'clock. Back corner booth. I arrived early, choosing a seat that faced away from the window. I wanted her attention on words, not distractions. When Tiffany came in, she looked older than 28, stress carved lines around her eyes. She fiddled with her purse strap, then sat down and started talking before I could. Mom, I know you're angry, but Harry lost his job. Collectors keep calling. People show up at the door demanding money we don't have. I let her finish, then answered calmly. I'm offering you one chance to end this with dignity, Tiffany. Her brows knit. What do you mean? Public acknowledgement of the truth. Full disclosure of what I've done for you both and why I left. Her face reddened. You want me to humiliate myself in front of everyone? Number, I want you to tell the truth. There's a difference. What kind of acknowledgement? She asked warily. I'd spent 2 days working through that exact question. Sunday, during testimony at church, a letter to the Tribune, a Facebook post for all our mutual friends. You'll tell the truth. The tuition, the wedding, the mortgage payments, and the ultimatum that drove me out. Her cheeks flushed deeper. People will think. They'll think you had a mother who sacrificed her retirement so her daughter could thrive, and that you took it for granted until it was gone, I said evenly. Tiffany stared down at her untouched coffee, silent. And Harry? She asked at last. Harry no longer factors into anything with me. The restraining order is permanent. If you stay with him, that's your choice, but it means choosing him over me. Her voice trembled. So you're asking me to choose between my husband and my mother? I'm asking you to see the difference between a man who threatened me and the woman who raised you. Her silence stretched. Finally, she asked, What about the house? It's been in the family forever. It's already designated for the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. 3 veteran families will live there. The paperwork is signed and filed. The words landed like a blow. She blinked, stunned. Even if you do everything I ask, the house won't return to you. That decision is final, I added gently but firmly. If we rebuild anything, it must be on love, not inheritance. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant for it to go this far. Sorry isn't enough, I said quietly. For 5 years, people saw you and Harry treat me like a servant in my own home. They saw you choose his demands over my dignity. Words won't change that. Actions will. What if I can't do it? She whispered. What if I can't stand up in front of everyone? Then you'll live with the consequences. Men like Harry always run when pressed. You can either run with him or face the truth and rebuild. Her tears this time felt real, not calculated. If I do what you ask, could we ever have a relationship again? Maybe. But it will be one built on honesty and respect, not guilt or money. How long do I have? Sunday. Church at 10. If you're not there, I'll know your answer. She rose slowly, shoulders heavy. Mom, could you ever forgive me? I studied her, seeing flashes of the little girl who once braided dandelions into crowns. Forgiveness and trust aren't the same. I forgave you when I left. But trust will take time and proof. She nodded and walked out. Sunday was 4 days away. When the morning came, the sanctuary was full. Word had spread. I sat in my usual pew, 3 rows from the front, waiting. Pastor Williams led hymns, but I could feel the congregation buzzing with expectation. Then Tiffany rose from the back. She looked small, but her steps were steady. At the podium, her hands gripped the edges tight. I need to tell you something about my mother, she began, her voice carrying through the hushed room. For 5 years, she supported my husband and me. She paid for my college, my wedding, even our mortgage. She sacrificed her retirement so we could live comfortably. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the pews. She gave us her home, the place she shared with my father for 20 years, and 3 weeks ago, when she refused to act like a servant to my husband, we told her to leave. She chose dignity over obedience. The sanctuary was silent. Even the children were still. I stood by and let my husband disrespect the woman who raised me, Tiffany said through tears. And I sided with him instead of her. I was wrong. We were wrong. She deserved gratitude. We gave her ultimatums. She turned, looking directly at me. Mom, I know sorry isn't enough, but I hope it's a start. The congregation erupted in murmurs of support. Pastor Williams returned to the podium, voice thick with emotion. Sometimes the hardest courage is admitting our failures. Tiffany has shown courage today, and her mother has shown us all what dignity looks like. After the service, people surrounded me, embraces, handshakes, words of support. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my hand. We knew you were helping them. We just didn't realize how much. Tom from the hardware store clapped my shoulder. Setting boundaries with family isn't easy. What you did took strength. The most meaningful moment came when Tiffany approached outside. The letter to the Tribune runs Wednesday. The Facebook post goes up tonight. She hesitated. Harry left town yesterday, packed his truck and disappeared. No note, no word. I wasn't surprised. Men like him always ran. I'm sorry your marriage ended this way, I said. I'm not, she whispered. I filed for divorce this morning. He'd been using my credit cards for gambling. The debts were worse than I knew. 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of what was once my family home. Now, 3 veteran families moved in, part of the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. Children's laughter rang out as Sergeant Maria Santos guided her kids toward the new playground. Mrs. Hartman, she said, eyes shining. This home means everything to us. Thank you. Veterans know sacrifice, I answered softly. This house belongs with people who understand that. Meanwhile, my life had grown peaceful. My lakeside cabin was modest but perfect. Morning coffee on the deck, afternoons fishing, evenings reading. Simple joys felt like luxuries after years of strain. One morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Tiffany. Mom, I'm 3 months into counseling, learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we have coffee sometime? I want to earn your trust back, one step at a time. I looked out at Flathead Lake, where an osprey hovered, then dove. Tiffany had kept her word. The Tribune letter, the Facebook post, both honest, both public. She was taking responsibility, not demanding forgiveness. I typed back, "Coffee sounds good. Saturday at the diner." Her reply came instantly, "I'll be there. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me completely." I set the phone aside, watching the osprey rise with a fish in its talons. Sometimes patience and dignity are rewarded, even when the burden feels unbearable. The sun slid down behind the Rockies, painting the water gold. In the distance, children laughed at the veterans' housing. Families building new lives in the place where I had finally learned the line between generosity and enabling. Justice had been served, dignity restored, and maybe, just maybe, a daughter ready to rebuild on truth instead of manipulation.